Thanks, everyone, for joining today. I am looking forward to this conversation. I've been in the technology and project management and lately product management space for more than 20 years. And I've watched technologies come and go. Every now and again, we have these introspection points and you say, oh, there's something really interesting and new happening here. I think it happened only a few times in my life. Once was the internet, and another time was apps and smartphones. And I think we're in another one right now, which is around AI. So it's interesting. People have been talking about AI for a very long time. Actually started in the 1950s, if you can believe it. And actually, people thought it would be wrapped up and we'd have it all solved by the 60s. But look where we are right now. And we're finally getting somewhere with AI. And some of it's good. Some of it might question, some of you might question whether it is good or bad, but we are in the middle of it and it is coming and it's here. So I realized I was kind of a little bit in the background thinking about AI and reading about AI, but I think everyone started to notice when this little product called ChatGPT showed up. And that's when I got very interested and started learning this for myself. I like to call myself an occasional developer because I like to sit down and tinker with the back end and see what happens so that I can understand why ChatGPT works the way it does and other tools work the way they do. And I've sort of reverse engineered it. And I'm going to present that to you today in a way that I hope you can understand. Now, before we get started, I do want to mention that I can't see the chat window. I know Tatiana can, and we're going to have some time at the end for questions and answers. If anything major comes up, please let me know, Tatiana, and we'll move forward. So let's go ahead and talk about what we're going to talk about today. First of all, I do want to make sure that you get a no jargon explanation as to what AI is. And you might have heard some other technologies being thrown out there in the news. It's interesting when we talk about the news, we actually are seeing people talk about ChatGPT using the words deep learning and machine learning. But what exactly are they and how are they different from what we use today? So I'm going to talk about that. I'm also going to provide you some ideas on how you might form teams. Now, it might be a little weird to talk about AI teams. Well, there's two types of audiences that I think might be on this call. And you can, of course, share your experience down below in the chats. But I think one of the things that is interesting is if you are a business that is working on building some sort of a product and you're using AI, there's a certain way you need to form your teams. And if you are a business that maybe isn't going to try and build AI, but you want to use it, there's some things, very important things that you need to be aware of in order to use it successfully. So I'll talk about that. And then I'm going to walk you through how we can create a whole new business and market it using AI. And I'm going to walk you through that using these slides in this presentation, and it will give you an idea as to how you can use these tools. So if there's anything that I can leave you with today, it's just one thing. I'd love for you to look at that. What is AI? And underneath that, it says a prediction system. Okay, so we're going to walk through this and you'll understand what I mean by predictive systems as we go through this presentation. Unlike your typical software that you use, let's say you log into your corporate network or you're searching for a car, what you're doing is you're reading things from a big database. You say, hey, what kind of cars are in stock? And I want the blue one, and I want it to be an SUV. All those things are just coming from a database. And when you type your search button, it shows that to you. Well, AI is different. AI predicts other things that you might want as well. So for example, if I go into ChatGPT or some other AI system and I say, hey, what color should I paint my house? It might say, you know, yellow is a very common color. You should think about using yellow. But if you sit down and ask that same exact question, you might get white is most popular house in America. So you might want to choose house color in America. So you might want to choose that. So it may not even provide the same answer twice. It probably won't. And also, because it's a predictive system, we can find uses for it in many other areas rather than just say having a chat with it. We're finding this in the medical fields right now as well. For example, let's say that there's someone takes an X-ray and we need a radiologist to review it. Well, maybe the AI can look at the X-ray and say, you know what, I'm seeing some things here that you may not see, and point that out. Vice versa, the human being might be right as well. So these are tools that can predict things, but not necessarily have all the right answers. So when I started to get my arm around this, people kept saying it's prediction, but well, what does that mean? How does that work? How can I understand that? So what I did is I sat down and did a thing that most people that are just learning AI and actually want to get their hands dirty and write software code is you sit down and you write an artificial intelligence program that can take an input, which is a picture, and that picture could be a cat or a dog. And then the AI can respond and say, this is a picture of a cat, or this is a picture of a dog. And this helps you understand prediction systems in a much better way. Now, I'm not, of course, going to share any code with you today, but I am going to share with you what I learned. So I'd like to ask you, what do you see right now in this image? If I just flash this up, I think you'd probably say, I see a dog laying in the backyard, maybe protecting its ball. And that's what you and I see as humans. Now, unfortunately, when you're training a computer on artificial intelligence, and this is going to be very important, you're going to find out that the accuracy of ChatGPT and all these other systems you use is going to very much apply to what I'm about to share with you right now. We rely on human beings to inform the computer as to what they're seeing. And that means that when the computer looks at this image, there is no dog. Some human being said, there is a dog in this picture. So when I actually wrote my software program, I had to inform the AI that this is a dog and learn from this image so that you know that it's a dog. And so let's take a look at how that computer looks at things. Here is how the computer kind of sees that image of a dog. What it sees is patterns. It doesn't necessarily know that there's a dog in the center of the page. As a matter of fact, it sees lots of things. It sees these triangles in the back, and those are houses. Those are rooftops from homes. It sees those poles, and it sees those electrical cables, and it sees the distance between them. So it's actually learning a whole lot about this image that doesn't even have to do with the dog. It sees the bushes and the grass. But one of the things that it does see, if we focus on the dog, is it sees some patterns in the image as well with the dog. It sees that there's these two floppy things on the left and right. There's a distance between them. It sees a pattern there. Those, to us, look like ears. To the computer, it's some patterns. It sees two little dots that are separated a little bit, and then just shortly underneath that, there's a red tongue. So that's the nose, and there's the tongue and an open mouth. Okay, so again, it doesn't know that there's a nose and a tongue, but it sees the two dots that represent the nostrils on a nose, and it sees that red tongue, and it now is recognizing that pattern because it's not really storing a picture of this dog. It's storing the patterns that it recognizes in this image. So if I were to feed a picture of a dog to the AI right now, there's a very good chance it's going to say, I don't know what this is. Because to the computer, even if it knew that right in the center of that image is a dog, where are the legs? It's not standing, right? So the AI needs to receive a lot of information to be accurate. And this is where we get into training the AI. So usually what happens is when you're using, if you've ever used ChatGPT, and you type in a question, it always seems so smart to answer all the questions. Well, that's because it has billions upon billions of data to call upon from the internet. And that's the same thing with the simple exercise that I took when I was training a dog, training the computer to learn how to identify dogs and cats, rather. So here's the deal. You need to send pictures of small dogs, tall dogs, fluffy dogs, short-haired dogs, dogs that are with human beings. And all these images are things that the computer can find patterns in order to determine whether or not the picture you submitted is a cat or a dog. So let's take a look at this in real life. Let's take a look at this picture that I never informed my AI existed. Okay, so I created my AI program and it said, all right, I'm ready. Tell me, give me a picture. I want to know, is this a cat or a dog? And so I give this picture to the computer. That looks like a dog to you and me, right? And this is the interesting part. If you and I were walking into a park and I said, oh, you're going to love the dogs here. And for some reason you said, what's a dog? You had never seen a dog before. Well, I could just bring you to the dog park and maybe there's a few dogs over there playing. And I point to them and I say, those are dogs right there. There might just be a few, 5 or 6 of them. But then as we continue walking through the park, you can start to see all the other dogs, people holding dogs, really large dogs. You can start to recognize that they're dogs right away. As a human being, you have that capacity, that capability. I didn't need to train you on over 25,000 images of cats and dogs for you to start recognizing that. And interestingly, you can look at this picture and you can say, I see a dog behind that fence. Now, let's take a look and compare it to one of the images that I submitted to the AI to train the AI. You can see here that these dogs actually have a lot of similarity. To you and me, we can look at this picture and say there's a match. And we actually think that the AI should be able to do that too. Look, the floppy ears, they're kind of a similar distance. They kind of look similar. There's that nose, there's that open mouth. I think this is a good match. But what does the computer see? The AI takes a look at the patterns, right? And the patterns seem to be there. The AI knows that to some level of accuracy, there could be a dog in there because it sees those things that I just talked about, the nose, the ears, the mouth. But look at these weird hashes going across the image. If I didn't train the AI to expect that there might be dogs behind a fence, then then it may not know that it's really a dog. It may say, this is not something I recognize, so it's not a dog. So this is what I want to point out here is that, again, the computer didn't just say no, it predicted that it was a no. And it actually gave a number back saying, I'm about this much accurate that it's a no. So the computer said, you know what, yes, I believe there could be a dog in there, but I don't think there is, so I'm going to say no. So it predicted that there is not a dog in the image I submitted. So now that you get a little bit of an idea as to how this works, let's talk about the thing that is in the news everywhere, and that is a product from OpenAI, and that's called ChatGPT. Now, there's many of them out there, okay? There's not just one. Of course, ChatGPT is having its moment in the sun right now. Microsoft is embedding their own version into their Edge browser. There's many others. Google has a technology called Bard that we'll talk about. So I'm not going to get into details about how exactly these work, but I am going to give you some examples. GPT is actually a really well-known term called generative pre-trained transformer. And that's what ChatGPT stands for. That's actually the technology that it is using in order to provide a very nice user interface for you to chat with a computer. Now, the only way it can do that is by using this thing called a large language model. And it's based upon billions of text around the internet. If you write a blog, there's a good chance that ChatGPT was trained on that blog, and it recognizes the patterns of how you type. It recognizes the patterns of how news is provided on various news sites. And it recognizes the patterns of how other people type all around the globe. So with this large language model, you can create this thing called the GPT, and we're not going to get into the details of that, but that's actually what's running all of this in the background. So let's talk a little bit about the difference between a search engine and a consumer GPT system. If you go onto Google today and you say, tell me about the world, it's going to provide a number of results that are very accurate and hopefully accurate and factual based on what you typed. And that information is going to probably be pulled from sources that Google knows to be the most accurate and the most factual based on the query that you typed. Okay, so it's presenting links to websites for you to click on those and read further and make a determination as to whether or not you think this is accurate. So think about that for a moment. If you are doing research on something and you're using Google, you're probably going to type in that search bar quite a few times, looking for various things. You search for one thing, you start to see some terms you're unfamiliar with, you search for another thing, and you start to read some more articles. Maybe a book is recommended and you read the book. That's how Google works. That's how search engines work, is they give you the information and you start to do the research. Now let's take a look on the other side of this. If we take a look at these GPT services like ChatGPT, if I type, "tell me about the world," you might get a story. It might explain, well, the world was formed like this, the universe, Big Bang, whatever, and then all of a sudden you get some sort of a result. And the result may not actually be based on what exactly it is that you're looking for. And also, it's combining words together with all the different writing styles that it learned to provide you with what looks like a humanistic response. That does not necessarily mean that the data is accurate. And you may have heard some stories in the news, and I'll go through those in just a bit. But I thought it would be interesting to look at what I mean by that data not being accurate. And I want to share with you my own example. So I am an author. My name is Bill Raymond. I'm an author. About 10 years ago, I was heavily involved with the Microsoft Corporation, and they have a product, which you may or may not have heard of, called Project. And they have a really large version of that called Project Server. I help companies implement this software. Now, I did it so many times. I worked with a team where we implemented hundreds of versions of these. And so I would write about it frequently, but not that frequently. And I wrote a lot about it with this person named Gary Sheffitz. He was my co-author for this 1,500-page book that I wrote. And then we also created 4 other variants of that as well to make it a little bit more easy to read. So here I am. If you go onto Google right now, or Bing, or whatever, Amazon, and you search for Bill Raymond, Microsoft Project Server, this book on the left is the thing that you're probably going to see. Now, I was the co-author with Gary Sheffitz. Let's put a pin in that for a moment. Let's talk about one of my colleagues. The person that also writes a lot with Gary Sheffitz and also writes on his own or with other people is a person by the name of Dale Howard. As you can see here, this is just a few of the books that he and Gary worked on together, and there's at least 15 of them. Let's put a pin in that. Let's go over to ChatGPT, and I'm going to ask it a question. Hey, my name is Bill Raymond. I am an author that publishes books related to Project Server. List his published works. And it says, well, I don't have any data after 2021. Remember, I wrote this book 10 years ago. Actually, I think it was in 2013 that it got released. So I think it was exactly 10 years ago. So it should have that data, right? So I'll just go ahead and say, well, what are some good books on Project Server? And here's ChatGPT saying, oh, well, here's a few I recommend. And look at that. There's the very first book on the number 1. It says Project Server 2013, Implementing Project Server. That's the one that I co-authored with Gary Sheffitz. But it says by Gary Sheffitz. Okay, very often when you see a book and it says it's by this author and that author, the first person that shows, they usually get the credit. So that's fine. So let me ask the question here. Does the first one have a co-author? And then what happens is it says, oh, apologies for the confusion. This book was co-authored by Dale Howard. Wait a minute, Dale Howard isn't anywhere on that book. He's not mentioned once, I don't think. And I'm the co-author. So why on earth is ChatGPT saying that Dale Howard is a co-author? Now, let's take a second and think about this. Let's say that I work for New York Times and I'm writing an important article about this topic. And I used ChatGPT to tell me who these authors are. And I put that into my publication. That would be misinformation at that point. Okay, so I'm using a very simple example where we're making fun of the fact that I'm not listed on a book, but there are serious consequences, and we're going to talk about some of those when we focus on using GPT services, large language data models for doing pure research. So let's take a look at why this happens, though, because I'm actually less offended by this and more interested as to why it happened. So here's what happened. In the background, behind the scenes, these large language data models don't just store all the text in the world and also try to figure out how all of the text fits together so that it can accurately talk to you as if it's a human being. It also connects data together. And so you can see over here on the left, we have Google and Microsoft, Oracle, and Intuit. Those are some software companies, right? And there's project software. There's Microsoft Project Server that I asked about in my query. And there's a whole bunch of those. And then it says, well, who are the authors? Well, it turns out Gary and Dale write about these technologies all day, every day. They write lots of books. I do it occasionally, and I really don't even do it at all now. And for the last 10 years, I haven't done a whole lot of that. So here's what really happened is ChatGPT predicted the answer. It didn't say, here is your answer. This book was authored by these two people. What it said is, I'm predicting that Project Server was written by Gary and Dale because they are the two preeminent authors and writers on the topic. Okay, so that's what really happened in the background. So now, if you take a look at some things that you might have seen in the news, such as some lawyers accidentally citing fake stories from ChatGPT, and you might have also seen some other simple stories like, LLMs like Google's Bard doesn't know that the letter E is in ketchup. It's because the computer in the fake cases with the lawyers, what happened was the computer said, you asked me for some cases, and here are some things that make sense to me, and I will predict some cases. And so it might have provided some real ones, and it might have provided some fake ones. Now, of course, ChatGPT and Google and all these companies are fully aware that this is probably not sustainable. People will use this for research, and they're working out ways to solve that. This is why, for example, Google said their ChatGPT competitor will mostly show up in the browser, and it's going to show up alongside search so that you can kind of make a determination. But this lawyer went and used citations that did not exist, or these lawyers rather, and they're paying the consequences for that. But also, the GPT system will also take a look at what everyone's talking about. How many of you in the last few months, maybe even the last few years, have talked about the letter E being in ketchup and wrote extensively about it? And how many of you even thought about the letter E being the second letter in the word ketchup? Probably none of you. Maybe there are, but it wasn't written about enough. So there isn't a large enough body of knowledge. So when this person over here on the right-hand side, this is actually Elizabeth Lepato from The Verge, she asked a simple question, how many times the letter E appear in ketchup? And it says it doesn't exist. And it even wrote the word ketchup. It's because it doesn't have knowledge on the fact that E is in ketchup. So I understand this might be a little hard to get your arms around, but remember, it's using information that it's seeing on the internet. If people aren't writing about it, then it probably doesn't have the information to share. Now, I talked about some of how this works, how prediction works. And I also talked about some of the negative aspects of that, for example, not getting factual information. But now let's take a look at this from another perspective. Let's think about what this graph has. all this data, I said billions upon billions of data that are in the system. How can we make use of this? Well, think about this. That graph that I showed you that just had Google and Microsoft and Project Server and some authors, there's a wealth of information here about the Earth, the universe, solar systems, animals, plants, insects. And so you could actually use this information, of course, to do some level of research. But where it really gets interesting is it can help you with brainstorming for writing and coming up with new ideas. And this is where you might see that there's a lot of people on strike right now, at least here in the United States and Hollywood. People are worried about artificial intelligence taking over their jobs. I'm not so sure they're going to take over their jobs, but it can certainly help speed the process up. And it might mean that maybe your job is less important because we have these technologies. And I don't mean to be flippant about it, but that's how people think. But let's take a look at this from a really positive perspective. I'm going to go ahead and say, well, given that this model knows everything and everything is somehow connected in some way, I can ask it a question that has never been asked before. If you Google this, I don't think you'll see it. Here is a question. Pretend a butterfly and the solar system Alpha Centauri fell in love. What might be some common hobbies they can share together? And take a look at what comes back. This never, ever happened, right? This is not something that we are aware of, that butterflies can't fall in love with a solar system. But look at the cool examples that it gave. They can stargaze. The butterfly could perch on a celestial telescope while Alpha Centauri shares its knowledge of the cosmos. Or here's my favorite one, the fifth one, music and harmony. The butterfly's delicate fluttering wings could produce ethereal sounds, and Alpha Centauri's gravitational waves could create cosmic harmonies. And together they'll create celestial melodies that resonate across the universe. You could imagine how that could turn into at least a short story, right? Or a poem. You could imagine how I could break that down and turn that into a much larger story. And I think that's so interesting and unique. And I don't know if I would have ever thought of that, even in my wildest imagination. So these tools are great, and they provide a lot of availability to you for you to think outside the box. But just do know that there's the accuracy is something that we do need to be aware of. So here's a few things that I like to think of when I think about AI. If you are trying to research topics that are well documented, for example, many things in nature, our weather patterns, our weather systems, data around population and things like that, there's a very good chance that your AI is going to be as good as a search engine. However, if you're planning on doing real hard research, you should not be focused just on AI. AI might give you some great examples, but it might also lie to you. And that lie is just because it's predicting. It's not purposely lying. It's predicting words that it thinks that you might want to see. So I would say that if you're working on some research, for sure, use AI a little bit, but you probably want to go to the source of that information and spend that extra time to read that detail. Where it's super good is brainstorming new ideas, summarizing content, and we'll talk a little bit about that, and improving content you already created. So you might be thinking, okay, this all sounds good. I'm really interested in having my teams be more effective using AI, and I'd like to use it. Now, there's two different types of people that would want to use it. One is, and I'm sure there's many others, of course, but I look at it in two categories. One, you are maybe a product company and you provide software or data to your customers, and you might want to use AI to improve that and add more, profit to your business. The other is that you just want to use AI to help your business. And that's what I do. I'm a small business. I use AI to help me summarize the podcasts that I create. I use AI to help brainstorm some ideas that I'm going to write about, things like that. But for highly effective teams, and for software development, you all have to remember one important thing. AI is predictive. It's not always factual. It's not always accurate. It's always going to try and make a prediction. There's nothing that still beats the human interaction with the computer and making sure that we're validating the assumptions that the AI is making. Now, with that said, if you are working just as a business and you're trying to build your business and work more efficiently, you can use it to create social media content. And I'm going to show you this in just a moment. Summarize your content, brainstorm new ideas, and respond to difficult situations. A lot of us sometimes get that email that says, I'm angry at you. You need to help me. I'm an upset customer. And you immediately think about how you're going to respond. Maybe you're angry too. Maybe you're worried. Maybe you kind of just don't know the right response. Plug it into ChatGPT and say, I want to provide a polite response and I want to give them this information. Maybe it can help you sort of soothe those nerves, figure out the best way to respond. Maybe it even provides you some ideas that you hadn't thought of before. Those are all great examples of using AI. If, on the other hand, you are writing software and you're creating or you're providing data to your customers and you want to make sure that you're on top of things, you will probably need to hire some data scientists to do all these things that look magical. In the background, it's really hard. I learned about creating that cats and dogs artificial intelligence. And let me tell you something, that was not easy, learning all of the mathematical functions, how to get that data in. It wasn't just a matter of feeding a computer a whole bunch of images. There was a lot that needed to happen in order to make that work. Data scientists are very expensive, but they are your best friend if you are going to create an AI system. And you'll need software engineers that are also knowledgeable about that. And I provide some other details here as well. But one of the most important things that I think is if you are going to develop any kind of AI for your data, for your product, for your service, for your software, is to make sure that you do follow some solid agile techniques. And I do have the Agile in Action podcast, but I think you should read up on that if you are not, because you are going to have to break things down into little chunks if you ever want to see value from this. It takes a lot of work to build an AI system. So with all of that, I share with you that AI is a predictive system, that one thing that I wanted to leave you with. And now let's find out how we can actually use this in real life. So I'm just going to walk through a simple example. I know that Omi is going to talk about software and other available tools that are out there in the market. So I don't want to step on that, but I am going to show you some real world examples of how you can use this tool. All right, so let's say that I am a lawyer and I'm starting my own trademark business. So I'm just going to say my name is Bill Raymond. I'm starting a new business and it's based on trademark law. And I'm going to call it BRTM, as TM standing for trademark. And I say, summarize this from my website, summarize this. So it actually just took that one paragraph and created a whole bunch of content. And I actually read a few trademark lawyers' websites, and a lot of the content's very similar here. So I would say that this is a good starting point. But who's going to want to read all of this text on my website? I kind of want to trim this down a little bit. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm just going to say, those are too many words. Make it more approachable and add bullet points. And look, here we go. We now have some bullet points. And this is the content that it provided. So it took all those paragraphs of text and summarized it into simple bullet points. Now, I might want to go back and edit these later. ChatGPT isn't designed for really doing editing, but I notice I'm having a conversation. This was good, but I want it in this format. I don't like these things. You can just keep asking and making changes. But this looks good. This is great for the start of a website. Now, I can go on to a product like Adobe Firefly. And you can see at the bottom of that screen capture there, it says, I want a strong and distinctive shield symbolizing protection and security, because that's what my trademark business is about. Okay, so actually Adobe has these products now, and there's many out there. You might have noticed that I've been using them throughout this presentation that can actually generate images for you. It's predicting what I want. It has tens of thousands of images of shields, and it said, here's an image of a shield based on what you asked for. And so I'm going to pick that bottom left shield. What I'll do is I'll just bring it into Photoshop and maybe just throw in my little BRTM company name up there. I could use Photoshop, Canva, whatever. And then I'm good to go. But wait a minute, I need a website. I wonder, can the ChatGPT actually create code? Let's find out. Create the code for my web page. I want the logo to appear on the left and the bulleted text to appear on the right. And it actually, if I happen to be a software developer, I can actually copy and paste this code and into the browser it goes. There. Now I'm inside of Safari in this case, or Google Chrome, and there, I have a web page. Now this is a good starting point, of course, and you probably want to hire a designer and do all those things, but look at what I just accomplished. I created a website in just a matter of moments. I actually went through this exercise myself, and it took me a total of 10 minutes. So here's another example before we wrap up for questions and answers. I don't know if you can see this in the screen capture. This time, I'm not sure what I want the prompt to be. So it says, I create lawn sculptures, and I want to create an eye-catching image of gardens with sculpted bushes made of fanciful animals. And you can see down here, it's those little generate buttons that you see. What it's doing is it's saying, here are a bunch of prompts, a bunch of things that you can tell me you want and ask for them. And what I'll do is provide you with some images. This happens to be Leonardo.ai, which predicts what you're looking for based on a lot, millions of images, and it actually creates something new and unique based on that. I could say, well, actually, I actually created a bush, a sculpture that looks something like that bottom left one right there. I'm going to use that. So what you do is just simply download it, put it into your social media post, and you're off and running. And it's going to catch people's attention. You know, we always talk about that thing where people are scrolling all the time. How do you get people to pause and take a look at something? I think people will pause and take a look at this, and they might click on your ad. So as we wrap up, I want to make sure that we have at least 15 minutes for the end of the conversation. There are some things that I want to be very clear about. Almost all these tools right now, at least right now, are free. And there are a few paid versions, but you know, you're paying $20 a month for ChatGPT. I know those prices are going to go up. But here's the deal. Free does not always mean free. You need to be very clear about your privacy statements, terms of service, content guidelines, and legal rights. Now, I just used the example of a gardener who downloaded an image for social media and posted it. You know, maybe you don't need to worry too much about all those rights, right? But if you are writing a book, if you are citing something for an article for your research and development, if you are a person that writes for a news media outlet, if you want to make sure that you are seen as an expert in the field and that you are providing accurate information, then you need to make sure that you do that extra research, but know these privacy and terms of services agreements. And a lot of people just sort of, you know, you open up your app on your phone and it says, do you accept the terms of services? And you say checkbox and agree. I don't necessarily recommend you do this if you are a business owner. I think that's actually the worst thing you can do with AI, because some of these companies even say, we'll use what you type and add it to our corpus of knowledge so that when other people ask this question, I might even be able to respond. Well, what if you are in a highly competitive market and you just said, I'm working on this top secret project called this, and the product does that. Can you create some marketing copy for me? Well, guess what? You just told that AI company what you have, and you may have also just told your competitors because it might use that data as a way to respond. Imagine your competitor says, I want to be more innovative in this market space. What are some ideas? And then it spits out your idea that you just entered. So it's super important that you're very careful with these tools. So with that, I think I'm going to wrap up at this point. I want to thank you very much for going on this journey with me. I hope that you learned a little bit about how AI works and how you can use it, and how you can also make sure that you are remaining legal, and you can use this in productive ways for your own business. Again, my name is Bill Raymond. There's my LinkedIn. URL there, and I think in certain product with this AI beings, like how we are on Unsplash that took this cute picture of a dog. So I do list out all of the technologies that I use here as well. So with that, I think we're at just 10:45 right now, and we can open it up for 15 minutes of questions.
All right, that was great. I'm not sure if it was me or you, but I was cut out a little bit. So in the chat, I posted your podcast link as well as your website link. So anyone can go ahead and listen to your podcast, and you can also connect with him on his website. I'll get your LinkedIn profile up there as well, but we'll start with the questions. All right, so the first question is, if we utilize responses from ChatGPT, do we need to reference ChatGPT or cite as a source?
Yeah, so I think that is, I'm not a lawyer, and so I'm not going to give you the legal response to that. But right now, my understanding is that they will leave that up to you. So you can go ahead and copy and paste that text and use it. I personally will do some brainstorming on there to get some ideas for things to write about occasionally, but I don't copy and paste. I just say, all right, those are good ideas, and I roll with it and write my own things. But of course, I do summarize my podcast, and it summarizes that, and I copy and paste that, and I never mention ChatGPT at all. However, if I were going to use this tool as a way to write an article, then I would absolutely reference it. I think legally, again, I'm not a lawyer, so I don't really want to say legally, but I don't believe that ChatGPT would require you to mention them.
Perfect. Okay, so the next question here is, how does AI shape the job market and technology jobs available?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think you're going to see a lot of interesting news stories about the doom and gloom of AI. And actually, it's playing out. I already mentioned this before. Here in the United States, in Hollywood, we have two major unions, the writers and the actors unions, on strike right now, slowing down the pipeline for new content for our favorite services like Netflix and Disney Plus and all that. And the reason for why they're most worried is because of AI. Some of these studios want to scan a person's face and just say, we can use that in perpetuity for anything we want. And by the way, we're not going to pay you. I just showed you a really cool example of how a butterfly in a solar system could be connected. That's a really cool story. Someone just comes up with some little nugget, a little spark of an idea like that. They could play out that whole thing using AI. And while maybe we're not going to get rid of writers, I could see why writers are scared. I can see why actors are scared. But here's the other thing. Just as with any market, AI is not going to take over. What it's going to do is spawn new jobs. So I do think that if there's one thing that you could do right now, if you're worried about your job, then to get really interested in AI and start using it to understand how you can use it to support what you do, to maybe do things a little bit better. I do think there's going to be whole new markets that open up. As a matter of fact, I mentioned that all these systems are based on billions upon billions of bits of data. Some of it's like, oh, there's a dog in the picture, there's a nose in the picture, there's a finger. But then there's also scientific research data where we need the scientists to go in and tag all of this stuff, because the computers aren't so smart that they can just tag everything. They can't just scan in some sort of an important scientific breakthrough into an AI and expect the AI to understand that. Human beings have to go in and make sure that that information is accurate. So those are paid jobs right there. So actually, AI is spawning a whole market of people that are providing quality data into the system. Some of them cheap, some of them good, and some of them very well paying. And we're going to see that kind of thing happen. The thing is that I don't believe that all these hundreds of millions of jobs are going to get lost. I actually think hundreds of millions of jobs are going to spawn, and there will be jobs that do get lost in that process.
I agree with that. I do agree that there's going to be a little transition, so not to worry. All right, so the next question from Rich here says, how has AI been used in commercial real estate?
Yeah, I believe that it has actually. I don't want to speak to your industry because I am not in it, but I can tell you that one area that I believe has been happening a lot recently is, and if you are in commercial real estate, you probably already are aware of this, but I know that there's some very large monetary funds scooping up houses around the country, around the world, actually. I'm hearing about this happen in many different places. And my understanding is that there are AI systems looking at where can we purchase cheap houses to see a quick turnaround in investment over the, let's say, the next 5 years. And AI is helping to make those determinations, looking at things not just like, where are these houses being sold and what's the median income, because you can look that kind of stuff up, but it can look at stock market trends. It can look at headwinds and things like this in the marketplace, pull all that information together, and you can make some pretty smart decisions about how to invest you can use that money to invest with your investors' money. So I am sure that AI is being used elsewhere in the commercial real estate business. And I would guess that if you just do some real estate AI searches on Google, you're going to find some. I have a feeling that we're going to find that a lot of these AIs in these markets are going to do basic things first, and then they're going to get more advanced over time. So I, for example, right when I create my podcast, I used to have to ask someone else to create the subtitles for my podcast. I had someone else edit the audio. Now I have an AI tool that does all of that for me. And so I just send it out to one person at the end, and sometimes use professionals where I need to. But it was really terrible at the beginning. I just threw the product away, didn't use it for over a year. And then I came back to it. It was doing all the things that I wanted. But things are moving very quickly. So stay on top of that if you're in real estate, because I think that's going to be a real hot market for AI.
All right, this one's a little long. So this is from Jim. And Jim wants to know, we have hundreds of grill and smoker reviews on our website. We were thinking that AI could help our visitors to be able to use AI to pick the perfect product for themselves. But it seems that it would require a lot of training or learning on the part of the AI to learn the features of each product and what the visitors' needs and wants are to identify the ideal product for them. Am I correct?
Jim, that's a really good question. And here's what's happening in the market right now. We are seeing that companies like Microsoft, Google, and OpenAI, so I showed you OpenAI ChatGPT examples throughout this presentation today. You may not be aware of this, but they actually have what's called, well, just as ChatGPT, GPT stands for the technology behind AI. Actually, there's another thing that is in the company's name, OpenAI, and that's their artificial intelligence APIs. And this is something you may not be familiar with the term API. That stands for Application Programming Interface. This allows you to feed your data into OpenAI, and if it's textual data, it can actually do that for you. So I actually do know of people that are using, I don't know them individually, but I am watching them online. They are they're taking their comment system from their site, and they're taking their products and feeding them into OpenAI for their own website. And so when people say, I'm looking for a grill that does this and has this kind of rating or whatever, it will respond. Now, you're going to need software developers for this, but it's surprisingly easy. I was getting a little frustrated with OpenAI because when I do my podcast, I have to summarize the whole podcast. Then I have to create social media posts for my guests and all this. I actually sat down and over the course of a week, wrote the code, used OpenAI's tools, and now it does it all for me. And imagine if all this was on my website and I could just then put a little search bar on top of it that says, I'm interested in one of your podcasts that talks about this topics. And OpenAI could deliver that, but on my website. So the answer is yes, you can do it. No, you do not need to invest in restructuring your entire website, but you will, I recommend that you look at either Microsoft or OpenAI's APIs with someone that's technologically proficient so that they can maybe help you do that.
Perfect. Okay. And then I have another question here. At what point should you start using AI for your business?
Well, I think you probably are, even if you don't know it. I don't know if you use Outlook or Google for your email. I don't know if you're noticing that a lot of these things, as you're typing, it's actually predicting words that you're going to type. That's already happening. I use Grammarly, which is a great product for artificial intelligence. I use that to check all of my work and make sure that my periods and commas are in the right places and that, I'm not using past tense. I always speak in current tense when I'm writing and things like that. But I think what you should be doing is using AI I think you'll find reasons to use it. I think I was trying to figure out why to use Chat GPT, for example, and I just started having conversations with people and then punching in some of the how I might respond and just see what it says. I was doing it for fun. And then I learned, oh, wait a minute. Oh, what if I did this? I could use it for this kind of a thing for my work business. I think there is nothing out there that is off the table in terms of using AI. I think this is a very important time if you want to remain relevant in the workforce and you want to stay up to date with where things are going. You are going to have to jump into it in one shape or form.
All right, that was perfect, Bill. I don't have any other questions that are coming through. So if you have any last minute questions and you want to ask them, go ahead and put it in the chat or the Q&A section. Otherwise, Bill, I added everything here for you. I've got his LinkedIn profile. So when you do connect, make sure you let him know in the note or whatever section, like, hey, I saw you on the webinar, just so he knows how you're going to connect. And then I also have a podcast there and your website. Let's see what Rod has to say really quick. Perfect. Okay, so I don't see any other questions coming through. So that was fantastic. Thank you so much, Bill, for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you, Tatiana, for having me. And thank you, everyone, for taking a listen today. I really appreciate the time you took today.